Hello and welcome. My name is Derek Schreiner. I'm the creator of the Break System, the solo roguelite heist game. Today we're going to be running through one full phase, that's 5 activities at the beginning of a mission, and we'll be looking at choosing a target, recruiting a crew, and navigating the first few mini-games. Each of these short activities simulates negotiation, navigation, infiltration, and more. And your choices will help shape your experience as you go. Now, this gameplay sample will end before the game is complete, but it should give you a good sense of the flow. What are we waiting for? Let's get heisting. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a bit of a playthrough of the Break System, and that involves us playing through one full phase. There are 2 phases generally, AM and PM. So think of it as the morning phase and then the afternoon phase. There is sort of a special time in between the 2 phases, which is noon. And think of that as sort of the pivot point that the entire mission revolves around. That's when you loot the vault, essentially. We're going to stop just short of that because I don't want to spoil any surprises, because the vault at noon is sort of randomly determined, as I discussed briefly in the quick start video. But let's just do a sort of quick, simple playthrough of the morning missions. So the first thing you'll need is the book, and you can read through the story at the beginning, and it's sort of got some embedded information about how to play the game, and you can refer to this as you want. We're just going to be looking at the rule book itself. Okay, so presumably you would start by jumping after the story here to the very first part, which is break in. And we looked at this briefly in the quick start as well. But essentially what you're getting from break in is this note that says, if you've already read this and you already understand it and you know how chapters are laid out and the conventions of the book, then just skip ahead to the next one. The next chapter, which is Radar AM on page 181. Essentially what this is telling you is the things that you need to play. So you'll need pencil or some other writing tools, a tactical mission sheet that you can find in the appendices at the back of the book, or you can download them from lockdownludonaut.com for free. D6, such as some of these dice here, some extra paper or writable surface. Now, I often just use scrap paper here to make my own notebooks, and then I would just scribble game notes on these. But I also provide this, which I call the grid of grids, and you can also download this as a PDF from lockdownludonaut.com. And I'm just going to be writing on this with erasable markers just to make it clear for you. Everything like the strategic campaign sheet, this we won't really be using today at all. There's a copy here where it's being explained. It will appear again in the rules when it's necessary. And there's a copy both in the appendix near the end and online at lockdownludonaut.com, which you can print out for yourself again. But that's only used when you do multiple missions to form an overarching campaign. We won't be doing that today. We're playing one mission. And for that, we'll be using the tactical mission sheet. For that, I have a printout here, which I've put in a slip of paper inside a sort of cellophane envelope, one of these plasticized packs, so I can write on it, erase it, and reuse it again. And that's mainly what this chapter, in a practical sense, tells you, the break-in chapter. It explains basically how the game works. The game proper starts at the next section, which you can find based on these little sort of interpieces here, these flowchart diagrams, and the arrow leads us to Radar AM. That means this is the radar minigame or activity, and AM afterwards indicates that it's the version of radar that you play in the morning. You might notice that there is a Radar PM as well near the end. Similarly, there are other games like ROTATOR, Refer, and you will also see ROTATOR and Refer in the PM. Now everything is sort of built around the noon pivot here, and there's a reflection of aspects that sort of are symmetrical to each other, but they change from AM to PM. Sometimes the rules of the game change, sometimes quite significantly, and in some cases it becomes more difficult because after you've broken into the vault and you're escaping, there's more pressure on you. So the game slightly changes to make things more difficult. So what do I mean by that? For example, in the race car, the rules are a little bit looser in terms of what constitutes a win, so you can get through that more easily. It's easier to drive to the job. Once you've done the job and you have to escape from it, the rules become a little bit more stringent on RACECAR PM, for example. Same thing with level, ROTATOR, radar, all of those games. They change or become more difficult or some combination thereof. Anyway, right now we're playing radar. We're also going to be playing refer, ROTATOR, RACECAR, and level. And that will take us through the morning phase, everything marked AM. And then afternoon, which I, again, don't want to spoil, and the other sort of branches and all the possible things that can happen, I'll leave that for you to discover. So first let's start with radar AM. So in this one, we're going to choose a target. What kind of a location do we want to hit in this heist, and decide whether searching for extra intel about it is worth the cost. There's also this little note afterwards, and you'll see these same sort of indications on each chapter. For a story-based tutorial example of this stage, see the Spring Break section 1 in the first part of this book. So if you want to see how these rules might manifest themselves as a story, you can go to Radar AM, this section here, and it will tell you the same sorts of things that I've told you here in these boxes, as well as sort of story elements here that you can read, which dramatize all of the different game information that's being taught. We're just going to look at the pure rules today. If you want to look at the story elements, you can look at the overview and deep dive videos that I have on this YouTube channel. So the overview is a more detailed description about what this game entails. You have a lead through some registry offices. For this mission, you'll choose a target from various available options. Some may be temporarily inaccessible, but you can risk your reputation to gain extra information about them. Now, when we begin this game, we don't have a reputation. You will earn the reputation as you play through the game, but when you begin, your reputation is 0. So on future games, based on our performance in this mission, we would earn some reputation. Maybe we have a reputation of 5 points, and that will change the way we play this game. For now, though, we're just going to pretend that this is our very first game ever. We have 0 reputation, so things with reputation don't necessarily apply to us immediately. So we don't have to worry about attempting to acquire the intel, carries risk, and so on. Or you may choose to skip the reconnaissance entirely to avoid risking your reputation if you're targeting a more accessible location. For this game radar, we are going to need the radar table, which you will find inside this same chapter, and it's also in the appendices if you need to refer to it. The strategic campaign sheet, which I showed you earlier here, which is this one here. And the usual things like something to write with, something, pens, paper, dice, that kind of thing. By the way, these bookmarks here, I talked about these in another video in the overview. They're basically just player aid summaries that have been sort of available for download that you can print them out. And I just use them as quick references to rules or to mark my place in various. You can print them out, cut them out. I've just laminated them. Okay, so for radar, what do we need? We need a tactical mission sheet, which we have here. This is the tactical mission sheet. And we need the radar table, which we have. This will explain in detail what the radar table is, the strategic campaign sheet, how it's used. We're going to jump straight to the rules. So the first thing that you read in the rules is that if this is the final time that you're playing, usually that's your 9th mission in a campaign, then you can skip this activity and go straight to step H. This is step A, so you would just step H is directly near the end here. This is our first game though. We haven't played this 8 other times, so we're going to continue. So we locate the radar table in the sheets and table section, which we found right here. And then we're going to do some coordinate rules. And if you're curious about how coordinate rules work and you prefer to look at it as an image, you can see the coordinate rules image below. And this shows you some example coordinate rules, but we'll go through it right now and explain it as we go. Actually, before we continue, let me get this sheet out of the way here, just to make it a little bit more visible for you on the white here, just in case. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do some coordinate rolls. So the first thing we have to do according to step C is to roll a die and find the x-axis value on the radar table. So that would be here. If we roll a 1 or 2, it's this column. 3 or 4 is this column. 5 or 6 is this column. So the first thing we roll is a 5. Whoops, I promise it was a 5. So the 5 would be here. So we'll either be getting the Tech Corp HQ, the Pharma Lab, or the government building. And then the next thing we roll, the y-axis, is 1. So that would be somewhere here. So where this and this meet is the government building. So the government building is forbidden to us. That's what you're rolling for here. So the location at the intersection of the X and Y roll may be temporarily inaccessible for this mission, regardless of whether you have attempted it or completed it previously. Like I said, this is our first mission. We haven't previously attempted anywhere. So that would be possibly an eligible location for us to visit, except that it's been forbidden in this case. If you really were adamant that you wanted to hit the government building, then you would need to get a PEEP process started, which is talked about in F. This is basically a process of investigating for more intel on something that's more difficult to find information about. In our case, however, we are going to do the pawn shop for this first mission because it's the easiest one. In general, it gets more difficult as you move from the bottom left corner to the top right corner. As you move further along to the right here, the distance becomes further to reach the locations, and as you move up here along the y-axis, the difficulty increases. And this manifests itself as distance being more grids to travel in RACECAR, and you'll see that shortly, and difficulty manifests itself as more grids to navigate in level, which is almost like the floor plan of the location that you're infiltrating. In our case, though, even though the government building has been forbidden, we're not concerned because I'm not planning on going there. If we had rolled the pawn shop, then we would have had to choose something else, either that's a little further away or a little bit more difficult, unless we wanted to do that PEEP process and dig a little deeper. But peeping also requires you to have a reputation, so it's something that's impossible to do in your first game. It is our first game, but we're going to go after the pawn shop in this case, and that looks like it's available. So we're going to record all of this mission information on our tactical mission sheet. Let's keep reading through the steps here. So this flowchart tells us that the way the decision logic works. So if you want to, you can go through the PEEP process. We're not going to in our case. We didn't do any previous missions, so we don't have to worry about eliminating the pawn shop. If we had done the pawn shop before, we couldn't do it again. Just show me where I haven't been, talks about forbidden or excluded locations. Select a remaining location as your target for this mission. That's the pawn shop. And then once you've selected a target location, you have another choice. You can decide to hire help, that is get a crew or attempt to hire a crew, or skip ahead to ROTATOR for a lone wolf challenge. So before we decide on that stuff, let's just record some of the information that we've determined in this activity now. So when we go near the end, every chapter has a set the record straight with just reminders before you continue of what you should have accomplished here. Mark your progress in the TMS's top section. The TMS is this tactical mission sheet. I'm just going to write my name on top here if my pen will work. Ugh. It's giving me a little bit of resistance here. The date is whatever today is. And it says to mark your progress. So I'm just going to mark it by filling in the first box on the left in the progress of the AM phase. This just gives you sort of a quick look at how far through you've gone. We're currently doing radar. Our location will be the pawn shop. So I will just say pawn shop here. Did we peep? No, we did not peep. So I'm just going to say no. The difficulty here, you can see on the table, the pawn shop gives us a distance of 1. It's relatively close. The difficulty is 1. It's relatively simple. And the overall rating is 5. So the difficulty is 1. The distance is 1. And the rating is 5. So the distance difficulty can each be 1 to 3, and the rating can be 5 through 13. Now, the higher the rating, the more difficult it will be, but also the greater the reward. So that's one thing to consider when you're choosing locations. But I would recommend starting somewhere near the bottom left and then gradually moving to the top right, ultimately. Okay, so we've marked our progress in the top of the TMS. We've updated the necessary fields in the radar. If you did attempt to peep, blah, 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 we have not. And then if you're playing the campaign, you would update the SCS's radar section in the campaign sheet here. And you would basically just mark off, we're trying to go after the pawn shop here. But in this case, we're not worried about the campaign. We're just going to play the first half of a mission. So we've got everything we need from this activity. Where do we go from here for our next steps? Where do you go from here? You have two options. You can attempt to recruit candidates to your crew. Go to Refer AM, which is the very next section. Or if you'd rather go alone, which is a little bit more difficult, but if you like a challenge, you can choose to do that as well. You would proceed directly to rescheduling your underworld contact in ROTATOR AM, which is a couple of sections away. And you can find these sections along the top here if you're ever looking for them. So I'm deciding that I am going to get a little bit of assistance. So I'm going to go to the Refer section and we'll do that next. Okay, so we are now going to do the Refer activity, and we can see where we are on this sort of interpiece here. We're in the Refer section, which is optionally an offshoot of Radar AM, which we just finished. We're going to do Refer AM, and then it leads to ROTATOR AM. So for Refer AM, we will recruit a crew for this mission, balancing the sum of their expectations against your current reputation. And if you want to see a story example of how this works, see the Spring Break section 2 in the first part of this book. So you would just go to the Refer section here and you could read through Refer to sort of get a dramatization of these mechanics. This minigame takes place between Radar and ROTATOR, but it is optional. If you skip it, you may have fewer modifiers and thus a greater challenge on your mission. If you do play Refer AM, then you will also play Refer PM later. But if you skip this stage, you will also skip Refer PM. This stage will allow you to recruit a crew. They will assist you with your current mission. Hiring crew is optional, but their skills can make missions easier for you. This minigame is flexible. You may play it before or after selecting your mission in Radar AM. Each candidate's expectation must be reconciled with your offer to determine whether they join you. It's not as straightforward as you get to join. You have a little bit of a negotiation, so we'll see. Choose wisely. Your crew can have a significant impact on this mission's success and beyond. So for the tools and materials, we need the Refer table, which you will find here. This is the Refer table. You will also need the skill table, which is here. We won't actually use the skill table here. We'll use the skill table whenever we use a character here later on in the mission. And the strategic campaign sheet if you're playing a campaign, as well as all the usual stuff like the tactical mission sheet, the dice, something to write with. So let's go to the rules. At the start of the mission, choose any one candidate to represent yourself. This choice is free and counts as a crew member, but they do not influence escalation or count toward your reputation recruitment limit. Later, they will not share loot, betray, or become discouraged. However, you must still complete steps B through E to determine their RP, or reputation points, which governs how many times they may use skills. Then hire any of the 8 remaining candidates by following steps B to H. So you can hire a massive crew of 9 people if you want to. We don't have a reputation yet, so very few people would be interested in joining someone who is a complete neophyte. But 1 person we can get for free. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a person, but first we're going to have to go through these. Even though it's free, and this looks like a process you would go through to negotiate with someone, what it sort of costs you, so to speak. I'm using cost not as a currency, but as a threshold. You would normally go through this process, and the free person won't cost you anything, but you do still need to go through the process so that you can find out what their abilities are. So first, consult the refer table and choose a candidate to attempt to retain for the current mission. So that is this refer table here. So you can decide who do you want to try and hire here into your crew. This 3x3 grid gives you 9 options, and each of them is unique, but the way that they're arranged is such that everyone in the column on the right is used in the game ROTATOR, so they have some skills at negotiating. Along the bottom row here, everyone is useful in RACECAR, so they have some skills in driving or things related to travel. Along the left column, everyone is useful in level. Level is the part where you're infiltrating. And then across the top, this row is useful in noon. Noon is things like lockpicking, safe cracking, all that kind of stuff related to the vault. Now you'll notice that where columns and rows overlap, you get corners, which means that the people in the corners are useful in 2 areas. So for example, the smuggler is useful in both negotiations and in transportation, right? And the insider is useful both on the location and in the vault. The people at the corners are referred to as generalists, and they're useful in more places, but they are sort of correspondingly less good at each of those things. Whereas the people in the sort of cardinal points, like the cipher, the charmer, the driver, and the enforcer, they're really good at one thing, and they are specialists. They're much better at, for example, driving than anyone else, the driver, but that's all they do. And then finally, that leaves the center here, this square, where the character is considered a universalist, and this character is called the Tinkerer. And the universalist is useful anywhere, but they're the weakest of all. So that flexibility is balanced out with sort of ability. And you can read more about that here, but I'm going to go for the Tinkerer. I like the idea of being able to have the flexibility of using this character anywhere. So I'm going to try to retain the Tinkerer here. So consult the refer table and choose a candidate to attempt to retain for the current mission. Choose a number from 1 to 6 as your offer. It's my first game. I'm not sure whether it's better to offer 1 or 6, and in time you'll learn that neither is necessarily better or worse, but you'll have your own sort of strategies that you may want to try. I'm just going to split the difference and talk about 3 as being my offer. For the next step, you'll roll a die to determine their expectation. So let's say I've offered 3. Now their expectation is going to be 2. So they were expecting 2, and I was willing to offer 3. So now, compare your offer with the candidate's expectation to determine the minimum RP, remember that's reputation, required to hire that candidate. We have 0 reputation, but this first hire would be free. If your offer and the candidate's expectation are equal, then that number is the required RP to hire them. It's not, so let's continue. If the values differ, they do. 1 was 3, 1 was 2. Then subtract the smaller number from the larger to determine their minimum required RP. That means that 3 minus 2 means that they have an RP of 1. And then it's got an example there. Where do we stand? Consult the tactical mission sheet for your current RP. We don't have any RP. That would be here. Right now for us, it's 0 because it's our first mission, or it can just be blank, either way. And you could do this process over and over again with everybody that you want to hire. But for this first one, we're going to get the person for free. It was just important for us to find out that their RP was 1. So when we set the record straight, the first thing we'll do is mark our progress on the TMS's top section, and that's up here. Notice that this progress is in I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's a little dotted line. That means that it's optional, but we chose to do it anyway. So I'm just going to mark our progress here. And this just gives me a quick visual look at where we are. Next, remember your RP does not diminish when hiring. It's a threshold. While you may have consulted the TMS's stats section, no RP deductions are made during Refer AM. For each crew member you hired in the TMS's Refer section, that's here, mark their field on the TMS sheet by slashing, with just a strike through, as many circular icons as they have RP. We hired the Tinkerer, the Universalist, and they have an RP of 1. It's early days yet, but what we do is put a slash through this. In later games, you may find that someone has as many as 6 potential RP. What this means is their abilities are sort of commensurate with their reputation. Their reputation is just 1 right now, which is still better than our 0, I suppose. But it means that they can do something with an ability that they have 1 time during the mission. So when someone just has 1, you want to be really careful that you save it for the best possible time. And that's everything to set the record straight. And we've done all of these things in this activity. So what's our next step? Where do you go from here? When the hiring is complete, proceed to scheduling the job with your underworld contact in ROTATOR AM. So that's where we're going to go next. Okay, so let's start with ROTATOR AM. So we flip over to the next section, and this is ROTATOR AM. You could come here directly from Radar AM if you decided you wanted to go it alone, but we actually took this little detour to do some hiring, and now we go back to ROTATOR AM. And what ROTATOR AM will do is pitch the job to a contact who will push back. In this negotiation, your timeline is on the table. And if you want to see this dramatized as a story, you can see the Spring Break Section 3 in the first part of this book, which is here. But for now, we're going to go just to the rules. Also, there's this note that if you've read the book The Fall Affair, there was a game included called Retlaw's ROTATOR minigame that you may have seen, an Easter egg, and it was like a simplified version of this game. If you know how to play that, then you'll know the basics of this, although this has some more details and things like that, some more complications. Before the job begins, you'll meet with the rotator, your contact who will handle the score. They're essentially like a fence or a smuggler. You outline the target and your plan, but they have their own priorities and schedule. The faster the job, the better for them. The more time you can take, the better for you. See, they want everything as quick as possible, but you want as much time as possible. This deal will be settled with clocks, not wallets. Your roles, choices, and other advantage will determine the job's time limit. Tread carefully and never forget, time is the most valuable target. So for tools and materials, we'll need the standard kit, which we have, like the tactical mission sheet, some dice, and something to write with. For the sheets and tables, tactical mission sheet, the rotator table that it talks about here is this one here. Now this is sort of a fancy 3x3 grid like tic-tac-toe, but there's a special version of it included here, and it's included in the back in the appendices as well. I'm not going to use this myself. I'm going to use this grid of grids. Just like the one that you see here, it is also available for download. It's also available in the appendices. If you want to copy it, make a bigger copy just so you don't have to write in the book. I'm going to use Rotator, and with Rotator, instead of using this sheet, or you could do your own on a pad of paper if you prefer, I'm basically going to be treating this top section here. This marker is giving me a lot of trouble here today, as if this was a 3x3 grid, like so. So I'm using that as if it was this 3x3 section, and then I'll be using these squares on the right and bottom as these squares here on the right and bottom, just to do some calculations. Very simple stuff. You'll see shortly. Now let's get to the rules. Unless you're using the rotator table or the grid of grids, then draw a 3x3 grid to work with. So you could just draw a 3x3 grid on scrap paper if you wanted to do it that way. But I like the idea of using this grid of grids because I can do an entire game on this one sheet and come back to it, almost like saving my game. Whatever works for you. Next, hit me. Roll a die. This roll may be modified by past mission bonuses or by the available skills of a crew member hired in Refer AM. So I'm going to roll one of these dice, and what I'm trying to do is fill this with numbers. I don't have to completely fill it up, but I may want to. If I don't like the rolls, I could use that universalist, the tinker that I hired previously in Refer, and I could use their one skill to change that roll if I want to. But we're very early in the mission. I may actually want to save this for later, like say, when we're trying to make an escape or when we're trying to pick a lock or something like that. I'm probably not going to use it here. So the first thing I need to do is roll a die. And I roll a 6. So I'm going to write a 6 here. Wow. I'm going to have to abandon this pen soon. So roll a die, you may modify it, we're not going to, and then check whether the current row subtotal is greater than 12. The current row that I wrote this in, this is its subtotal. Its current subtotal would be 6. Any blank spaces count as zeros. That doesn't exceed 12, but it's a little bit like blackjack. I want to get as close to or equal to 12 as possible without busting, so I don't want to go over. So I'm going to roll again. This time I roll a 1. My subtotal is 7. If I roll a 6 now, I will bust. I will get a 13. But I think it's much more likely that I'll roll 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So I'm going to roll again. And I get a 5. Okay. So that means the 5 here will add up to 12. Now I do this for every single part here. 1, 6. I wonder if I'm pushing my luck by rolling again, but the odds are still in my favor. It's basically the same odds as 6-1 for 1-6. 5. Wow. What are the odds? Okay. And now I'm going to keep going to the bottom. And you have to fill in at least one number for each of the 3 rows. You don't have to fill in all 3, but any that you leave blank voluntarily becomes 0. So the first number here is a 5. And then a 2. Okay, so now we've got 7 again. Should I roll again? Am I going to get a 6? 1. Okay. So we're done. We continued rolling, filling spaces, adding to the current row subtotals, and all 3 rows in the grid have at least 1 square filled. In fact, I filled all 9 of them up. So now we're going to add all uncrossed row subtotals together. So 6, 1, and 5 give me 12, like so. 1, 6, and 5 also give me 12. It's like getting blackjack, double blackjack. 5, 2, and 1 is 7 plus 1 is 8. Okay. These amounts represent the strength of your argument in negotiating. if I add the 12 and I add the 12, that's 24 plus 8 gives me 32. So I'm just going to write a little 32 down here. This is how strongly I negotiated with the fence. Then we go to the next step. It goes both ways. Now sum each of the columns in the grid to generate 3 column subtotals. So 6 plus 1 plus 5 is also 12. Then here we have 1 plus 6 is 7, plus 2 is 9. And then 5 plus 5 plus 1 is 11. So you see where this is going. We have a 9 and an 11 gives us 20, plus 12 gives us 32. So it turns out that we both argued equally well. They argued with a final point score of 32. We argued with a final point score of 32. Now, remember we have no empty spaces, so no zeros. Any column with a subtotal of 0 automatically receives 12 points. We don't have that. Cross out any column subtotals greater than 12. We don't have any greater than 12. And then add any remaining column subtotals together. Now we have to compare these two numbers. If your row total is less than their column total, they have out-negotiated you. If the row total is equal to the column total, and this is what applies to us, then you are both in perfect agreement, and the allotted hours for this mission will equal the location rating, or 12, whichever is more. So you're perfectly simpatico here. And if we look at our tactical mission sheet, remember that we looked at the rating for the location. The pawn shop has a location rating of 5. So we get 5 hours to do the mission, or 12 hours, whichever is more. 12 is more than 5, so we get 12 hours to do this. That's pretty good. So keep the rotator table handy, by the way. You will use it again in Rotator PM. So the things you did here in the morning will later come back to affect you in the evening, for better or for worse. So don't throw this away or erase this quite yet. It'll be useful to hang on to. But for now, we're done with it. So let's take a look at what we do next. There are just some graphical examples of what to do, how to make the calculations, the logic, if this is something that appeals to you to look through it in a more visual way, a reminder, summary. Let's look at setting the record straight. So first, remember to mark your progress on the TMS. I forgot to do this earlier, so a good thing we have this reminder. We do the next circle, that's for rotator. If you used any crew skills, update the refer section. We didn't use our crew's only skill use yet. On future missions, you would potentially have more characters, and each character would have more skills, but for now, they're very, very valuable and rare, so we didn't use it here. This doesn't apply to us. And then update the TMS's rotator section, which is here. While there won't be any elapsed hours yet, you should have set the allotted hours in the negotiation minigame. And remember, it was 5 or 12, whichever is more. Well, here's the more. I'm also going to get a new pen because this pen is giving me a lot of trouble. Next steps. Where do we go from here? With scheduling complete, there's no time to lose. Proceed to the traveling minigame stage, RACECAR AM. And that's what we'll do next. Okay, so here we have RACECAR AM. So we have just come from the Rotator, which is our underworld contact, and we negotiated with them and we set ourselves a timeline of 12 hours we have to do this job. We're going to be hitting the pawn shop. We have 12 hours to do it. And the next is traveling to the location with the RACECAR minigame. Chart a course between stops where every hour spent searching brings you closer to the job or costs you precious time. For a story-based tutorial example of this stage, see the Spring Break section 4 in the first part of this book. And if you go back to section 4 here, you'll see the story and all of the different ways that the game works, sort of in a fictional context, but we're just going to use the basic rules. Please note, a variant of this activity appeared in the Break System gamebook, The Summer Job. It was called Retlaw's RACECAR Minigame. If you know that game, if you've read that book, then you already know the basics of this game. This is a little bit more advanced and it has some wrinkles and you can use bonus powers and things like that. But we'll see that as we continue. Part of the job is getting there. RACECAR AM represents the journey between locking the schedule and arriving at the target location. The clock is always ticking. Even fruitless exploration costs you precious hours. With careful planning, smart use of any crew, and a bit of luck, you'll begin mapping routes one run at a time, one grid at a time. There's little danger now, but the course you chart here will influence your way out. Just like I said that you need to keep your paperwork from the morning negotiations for when you return at night to do the drop-off, you're going to be keeping your race car grids as well when you arrive, because when you escape, you're going to have to navigate the same locations. So for tools and materials, you want the standard kit, which is your dice, something to write with, something to write on. And you're going to need the refer table and skill table, which we talked about earlier. Also the tactical mission sheet, which we have here. And the grid of grids, which we're using as well. Here are the rules. First, assemble all necessary materials, which we've just done. You may want some extra blank sheets, especially if you're using the grid of grids, something to erase with, so these pens are erasable. Start your engines, track time and prepare any grids. Each time you attempt to navigate a route to or from the target location, you spend 1 hour. In the TMS's ROTATOR section, increase the elapsed hours by 1 hour for each grid you use, whether navigated successfully or not. Unless you are updating the grid of grids, make a new 3x3 grid. So what this means is in the progress section of the TMS, we are going to color in the next square, and you'll notice it's a solid line because you're always going to go at least one grid to travel. Notice the next two here and here are broken lines, and that's because they're optional. If we had taken a location which was more distant, we would have to navigate not one, but 2 or 3 different grids. And that's also represented on the grid of grids here, because it says RACECAR, RACECAR, and RACECAR, but you only use one for distances 1 to 3. You use another for distances 2 to 3, and a third for distances of 3. So if you're just doing the closest thing, you just fill in one grid. If you do something with a distance of 2, you fill in 2 grids. And if you do something with a distance of 3, you fill in all 3 grids. And whatever you keep here from the morning, you'll have to go back through at night, but it's more difficult. So keep that in mind. Let's get this show on the road. You're now traveling and you're trying to find a route. Let me just move this over here. You're trying to find a route between stops. Roll the die. You may accept it as it is or use an appropriate crew skill or previously earned bonus to modify it. Okay. So let's take our die here and we'll give it a roll. And we get a 3. So what we're trying to do is we're going to take these numbers that we roll and we're trying to form a run. To navigate a route, you will need a run of 3 numbers in a straight line on the grid. The lines can go this way, this way, this way, whichever way. And they can be ascending or descending or all equal. Those would all be valid. And in the case of the morning, it's fine if they're ascending, but not in a straight run. What do I mean by that? It could be 1, 2, 3, but it could also be 1, 2, 4 or 2, 4, 6. The numbers don't have to be immediately sequential. Similarly, it could be 6, 4, 2 or 4, 2, 1 or 3, 2, 1 or something like that. Or 1, 1, 1, 6, 6, 6. All equal also helps and forms a valid run. In RACECAR AM, in the morning, runs are more flexible, meaning ascending or descending numbers do not need to be consecutive, and a single grid may contain multiple valid runs of different types, but individual runs may not mix types. So you can't say 1, 2, 2. That's not valid because it doesn't ascend, it doesn't descend, and they're not all equal. Runs must be arranged orthogonally, so they need to go left to right, right to left, up, down, or down, up, but they can't be diagonal, and they each need to be at least 3 numbers. So we're trying to find a valid run here, to form a valid run, and so we'll start with 3. You can write it anywhere you want to. I'm never sure where to put numbers. I still haven't quite perfected my approach here. Let's put a 3 there. Here's another 3. That could be good, because then I could make a straight all equals. I'll just put it there. And a 5. Where should I put a 5? I don't want to put the 5 here, because then if I roll another 3, that would prevent me from forming my 3s there. I will put the 5 here, I think. 2. I will put the 2 here. The reason I'm putting the 2 here is that I could potentially make things here with 2. It doesn't interrupt the 3s, but I could also go 2, 3 and make an ascending run with 4 or 5 or 6. 4. There you go. Okay, so if I put the 4 there, that would not be valid. 3, 3, 4 is not valid. But if I put the 4 here, then I make a valid run of 2, 3, 4, like so. If you have formed a valid run, then this part of the journey is successfully navigated. Draw a line through the run and skip to step F. So I'm going to go like this. I have a valid run. See, the morning is much easier. The PM gets more challenging. Similar rules, but there are stricter constraints, and you're playing on this same board, which limits you as well. Step F, are we there yet? Check your progress. You have successfully navigated the latest leg of the journey, but you may still have farther to go. Check the radar section of the TMS. Does the number of successfully navigated grids equal the location distance? So what that means is, remember the distance here to the pawn shop was a distance of 1. That means we're going to need 1 grid completed. Well, we do have 1 grid completed, so we have gone the distance of 1. If the distance had been 2 or 3 to somewhere further away, like say the Tech Corp HQ, we would have to continue playing until we have 3 valid runs. But we've done this, so now we're good. Everybody out, journey complete. You should now have 1 to 3 successfully navigated grids. Hold on to those grids. You will need them again in RACECAR PM. Now proceed to the next minigame, Level AM. Again, you can read the rules as a flowchart. You can refresh your memory with the summary. There are some reminders, but I'm going to jump straight to set the record straight. Before you finish this activity, make sure you've done all the following. Mark your progress in the TMS's top section. We did that early on. Remember, that was the first road section, but we don't do the second or third because of the distance. If you used any crew skills, update the TMS's refer section. Again, that's here. And we didn't use our Tinkerer's crew skills, so this doesn't apply to us. Ensure that the elapsed hours in the TMS's rotator section have been incremented by 1 hour per RACECAR grid attempted, not just those successfully completed. All right, let me explain this a little bit. It's referring to this rotator section. Remember, we have 12 hours to do the job. Well, we just used 1 of those hours because we filled out 1 of these. If we had a longer distance to go and we were going 3 grids, then we would be writing a 3 in the elapsed hours. However, sometimes you may get lost, which is represented by not being able to form a valid run. Sometimes you will fill up a grid and just nothing goes your way, and your crew skills can't help you to get unlost, and you fill up a grid and it's invalid. So then you need to erase it, start again, but every reattempt of a grid also adds an hour. So if you had done 3 grids and 2 of them you had to redo, that would be 5 hours. The 1, 2, 3 that were successful, and then the 2 failed attempts while you were trying to navigate around and find your way through the streets. In our case, however, we were fortunate. We just elapsed 1 hour, so we're still well under the 12-hour allotment. And that does it for RACECAR AM. Next steps. Where do you go from here? With the travel complete, your next stop is the location navigation activity, Level AM. And remember to retain all of these grids because they'll be used again in RACECAR PM. And that does it for RACECAR AM. We've gotten to the location. Okay, so now we're going to play level AM. Level AM means we have reached the location. We got started, we picked our location, the pawn shop, we hired the tinkerer, who's a universalist that can help us everywhere. Not the most advanced character, they only have one use. But then we went and got a very generous schedule from the ROTATOR, our underworld contact, who gave us 12 hours to do the job. We traveled there, we had no significant incidents getting there through RACECAR AM, and now we've reached the pawn shop, and that is represented by a floor map in level AM. We're very, very close to the vault now. They have a strong box that we would be picking in noon, but this will be our last game, level AM. Map the location and make your moves, avoiding any patrols. Will you play it safe or push your luck hunting for souvenirs? For a story-based tutorial example of this stage, see the Spring Break section 5 in the first part of this book. So if you wanted to see what a sort of assault on that location might look like, you would go to this level AM part of the story, and it would show you all the rules that we're going to discuss here and some written examples of things moving around the environment and sort of story elements as well. But for us, we're just going to use the basic rules here. Before you can break the vault, you'll need to reach it. Level AM represents your infiltration of the target location floor by floor under the watchful eyes of guards and the ineffable whims of bystanders. Time is tight, movement is risky, and you need to pace yourself. Just rush through and you might survive, but calculated risks could leave you better prepared for what comes next. That's alluding to the fact that just like with the ROTATOR grid and the RACECAR grid, you'll be using the level grids, which are these bottom sections here. And just as with the distance, these bottom grids represent difficulties of 1, 2, and 3. So how many floors does this have? The pawn shop just has 1 floor, whereas the general headquarters for the tech corporation has 3. So it's more difficult. You'll have to navigate all of those levels. The pawn shop just has 1. It has a difficulty of 1, so we'll only use 1 here. But when you go into that level, you'll also have to escape out through that level. So the things you do now may affect you later on when you're racing away from the vault. Let's see more. Okay, so for tools and materials, we will use standard kit, something to write with, and some dice. We're also going to have some extra stuff in this, and you'll see that it lists tokens for crew and guards. So what do I mean by that? You could use anything. You could use buttons, you could use meeples. I'm going to use a few things that I have here. This is just, what do they call this? A tiddlywink. It's just like a small, almost like a poker chip. I'll use this to represent a guard. I'll use this green block just to represent my character. And in this case, the grid is used as a little map. So we'll be moving some tokens around, and I'll need some more dice. So I've got some different dice here just to sort of tell all the dice apart. So we have some tokens. We've got the level table, which is this right here. May or may not use it, but if we need it, that's where it is. There's also a copy in the appendices at the back of the book. Optionally, grid of grids. We are using the grid of grids, and the refer table and the skill table are also optional, depending on whether you use your character's skills or not. So those are the sheets and tables. This explains everything about the tactical mission sheet and its sections, the grid of grids. And it may seem redundant that, oh, why is it explaining the grid of grids when we've been using it for all the previous games? It's just so if you put it down and you come back to it later and you don't remember things, quite often I've had the experience of when I'm playing a video game and I come back to it, I forget the controls or I forget what mission I was on or any kind of details like that. Anywhere you go into a chapter, you'll be reminded of everything you need and what they mean in that chapter. So you don't have to go back and reread the entire beginning of the book. So let's get straight to the rules. Step A, assemble all necessary materials, which we've just done. You may want some extra blank sheets because you may want to make a bigger map and move pieces around the map or something like that. I'll be okay here in our case, especially if you're using the grid of grids. You may want something to erase with. It also helps for at least one of the tokens to be visually distinct to represent you, your crew, while the other represents individual guards on patrol. If there were more guards, I might have other tiddlywinks, of different colors, or they could all be the same color. But the important thing is just that they're distinct from this, just so I can tell. If I were to use, these two pieces as me and the guard, I might get confused as to who is whom, right? So we're not going to need these ones. I just happen to know this, but you'll see shortly. So some represent you, some represent the individual guards on patrol, and then you determine how many level grids you'll navigate in this minigame. The number equals the target location's difficulty as listed in the radar section of your TMS. So our TMS says that the difficulty of the pawn shop is 1. So we know that we're going to be navigating 1 grid, not 2 or 3. You'll need between 1 and 3 grids in total, or you can use the supplied grid of grids sheet. Increment your time by 1 hour per level grid. Add 1 to the elapsed hours in the rotator section of your TMS. So here we're going to be doing 1 grid, so we expect it will take an hour. So I'm just going to add 1 more hour. If you're not successful and you have to do it again, you would add another hour. Or if you were going, say, all 3 levels through that headquarters, that very advanced one, you would add 3, for example, or even more for multiple attempts. But that's what it's referring to. Okay, so we've incremented our time by 1 hour per level grid. We've added 1 to the elapsed hours. Then prepare a new 3x3 grid for the current level. Place a feature symbol, and a feature symbol looks like a percentage sign. So this will always be the same. So we put that directly in the middle. This is a feature. It's almost like a piece of furniture, or maybe a chest of drawers that you can sort of riffle through and search for some artifacts or some souvenirs, as the instructions put it. This represents a searchable landmark, such as a room or a piece of furniture. Finally, check the TMS's radar section to confirm whether you successfully peeped the location. We did not peep this location. We actually had a forbidden location elsewhere. So forbidden seems like a bad thing when you're not allowed to do something. But in the case where something is forbidden and you peep it successfully, you get information that is more than normal. And what that means is you can place all the landmarks wherever you want to. So you could, for example, put the entrance right next to the exit, which would make your game very easy. And it kind of sort of abstracts the concept of you having foreknowledge. Maybe as part of the peeping, you got some blueprints or something like that. So you got sort of an advanced look. But we did not successfully peep. So we're going to have to place some entrance and exit symbols randomly, because we don't know what we're getting into because we didn't have that advanced knowledge. So the entrance system, the entrance symbol is a 0 or an O or a circle. And just think of it as, opening or origin, something like that. And the exit symbol looks like a $sign or a currency symbol. And we'll determine that randomly by rolling coordinates, just as we did before in the radar section. So let's go with the opening first. The first is a 4. Remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know that the opening is going to be either here or here. 4 and 4. 4 and 4 gives us the middle. There's already something there. And those two things, the opening and the feature, cannot locate in the same place. You can't have the opening to a room come up under a desk, for example. So we need to re-roll the coordinates. 5. So now we know it's somewhere here. And 2. So 5 would be this. 2 would be this. So the opening is here. Now we want to place our exit symbol. So we'll roll coordinates for that. 6. So we actually know it's somewhere here. Ooh. And 5. So it's here and here. So here. And the money is where the vault is. This is where we want to get to. So we're trying to go from here to here. Looks very short, looks very easy, but there's always complications, such as there are going to be guards moving around. There are bystanders who may be able to help you if you didn't have crew members, for example, that could help you and you need to get something done. You might be able to pressure a bystander into helping you. There are also guards circling, and we'll take care of that shortly. But first we're going to determine where the bystander symbol, which is a question mark, where that goes. So first we roll a die, and then we start from the 1 o'clock position of the square closest to it and determine whether it goes in square 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just moving clockwise around the outside in all of the free available squares to place the bystander. So I rolled a 3. So the bystander is in square 1, 2, 3, and the bystander looks like a question mark, like so. Okay, now the last thing is in step E, the guard spacing. The number of guards depends on the size of your crew. Set 1 guard for 1 to 3 members, 2 for 4 to 6, and 3 for 7 to 9. We have 1 member in our crew. So this is the Tinkerer. So there would only be 1 guard. If it were 1, 2, or 3, it would be 1. So I'm going to use this red disc here to represent the guard. The guard would go, usually I place them opposite from the bystander, but in this case, you also want to make sure that they are equally spaced in the remaining spaces. So with 1, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces left. So what I would do is I would not place it like this, I would place it like this, because this space is sort of in the middle of 1, 2, and 1, 2 here. And you can see some sort of visual examples of this near the end. If you had, for example, 3 guards, how would you place the guards? And this would show you an example. If you had 2 guards, how would you place them in the spaces? If you had 1 guard, where would you place them? So you basically just want to make sure that they are roughly spaced out. So if you had multiple guards, you wouldn't want them all to be like this, for example, side by side by side. You'd want them spaced out so that it's, you know, guard, space, guard, space, guard, or something like this, you know, as equally as possible, just to sort of make it fair. See, the earlier marker didn't work as well, but doesn't rub off. This marker rubs off very easily, even though it works well. Okay, so now we've got the guard placed. We've got 1 guard, 2 empty squares, a guard, and then 2 empty squares. So 2 empty squares, guard, and 2 empty squares. Where are we? Using a single token, which I'm going to represent ourselves with this green wooden square. Place your token on the square containing the entrance symbol, which is the opening here. I'm just going to place it like so. You and the guards can occupy the same square. So for example, the guard, it is possible that the guard could move into a square which covers the vault. So you can't actually enter because the guard is there. You have to wait for the guard to be in some other square before you can access the vault. Similarly, you can't have anything to do with the bystander while the guard is there, or if the guard is on the opening and you happen to be in the same place, then you would be caught. Maybe. There's also a resisting arrest minigame, but we're not going to look at that quite yet. Okay, so now we've placed ourselves, we've just gotten in the entrance, we're at the opening, the guard here is on patrol. This is where we're trying to get from here to here. This is a piece of furniture or some other landmark that we could search if we wanted to look for things, and this symbol, the question mark, represents a bystander. Again, we probably won't need to have anything to do with the bystander because we have someone with skills on our crew that is useful in this area. For example, let's say you hired the driver and the driver is not useful in navigating buildings here. Then you might want to use a bystander if you need some help searching for stuff, for example. Okay, where were we? We've placed ourselves. Each hour you have a limited number of turns to act. Roll a die to determine the number of turns it takes to be taken, 1 to 6, unless you modify it with a skill or bonus. Each turn you act, the guards will move simultaneously, and then turns and maybe eventually hours are incremented. What does this mean? This means that the elapsed hours, for every 1 hour, you can do 1 to 6 things. And then every time you use up that hour, then you roll for a new set of turns. So the first thing we'll do is roll and say, okay, for this next hour, how many things can we do? Wow, 6, that's amazing. 6 is the best, obviously, possible. So we can do 6 things before we have to roll again. Now, if you had 1, it would mean that we had some trouble. Even if we could go directly here, it would take us more than an hour. It would take us at least 2 hours to find the vault inside this floor without attracting attention. But we have 6, so that's good. I'm going to use this as a countdown timer if you're familiar with that concept from dice. So basically 6, and then every time we do something, I'm just going to go down to 4, down to 3, 2, 1, and so on, just to sort of count us down. But for now, we have 6 turns left this hour. Your goal is to move your crew token safely to the exit, the $sign, never sharing a square with the guard. Each turn, choose your one action. You can move orthogonally, so not diagonally, but you can move up, down, left, or right. You can search a feature for an artifact, or you can attempt to persuade a bystander for help temporarily. You must act once, and you may not skip a turn. If you move into a square occupied by a guard, you've been compromised, and they will attempt to capture you. Then you may play the optional Reviver minigame to resist and possibly escape. Hopefully that's not necessary. If you choose not to play Reviver, so you're giving up, or you fail at it, you resist arrest and they catch you anyway, then you abandon this mission and your crew and go directly to a different minigame called Eve. If you move into the square containing the exit symbol and there's no guard present, then you have successfully cleared the level. You have to keep track of this grid as well because you'll need to leave and go from that vault back to the entrance. So you'll have to do it in reverse, but things will be different and more difficult. What next here? If you move into a square containing the feature, this percentage sign, then you've discovered a searchable area of the level. It may contain an artifact, which is an object you can carry between missions, and it will give you a one-time bonus in a specific location. You can revisit the square as often as you like, but you can only attempt to search it once, and only if no guard is present. To search, you must begin your turn on the same square as the feature, and the search action takes 1 full turn. What else do we need to know? If you move into the square containing the bystander, and there's no guard present, then you're free to sort of interact with them, and you found someone who might be persuaded to help you. We'll worry about that if we get to it. So let's try and see what we can do here. For the first turn, I'm going to move orthogonally 1 square up toward that entrance. Now our turn is done. If you move into a blank square or any with a previously searched feature or attempted persuasion and there's no guard present, nothing happens, continue to play normally. There's nothing here. There's no people. There's no things to search. We're just a little closer. But once you've done that, then the guards move. Once you act, the guards act and move all guard tokens 1 square clockwise along the outer 8 squares of the grid. So they move orthogonally and never enter the center. So it would move clockwise like so. Wow, so now we've got a bit of a problem here. Let's put this down to 5. We have 5 moves left that we can make this hour. But we can't move into the exit because now the guard is there. Okay, so what do? We will use our next move to the left here, which is where the feature is. And then they move clockwise like so. Okay, so now we have 4 things left that we can do. Well, we can't go back where we came from because the guard is now in that spot and would be captured, or at least we'd have to fight with them if we did. So we could move up here if we wanted to, and then we could go here. But we're on the feature, so maybe we want to search it. This might be our only chance to get an artifact, which would give us a sort of nice bonus for either later in the game or a later game, because you can carry them between missions. So, let's take a chance. Let's search this feature. Where does it say what we do here? If you move into the square containing a feature, which is the percentage sign, you have discovered a searchable area of the level grid. It may contain an artifact, an object you can carry between missions for a one-time bonus in specific locations. If you choose not to spend it, or you've already attempted it successfully or not, treat it as blank with no effect. But we will choose to search the feature. Then roll a die. On a 1 or 2, you find nothing. On a 3 or 4, you discover a curio. On a 5 or 6, a boon. A curio is an artifact that does something, and it's not necessarily good and it's not necessarily bad. It often depends on context, but a boon is always good. So the higher the number that we roll, the better. So I'm going to take this other die. I don't want to mess up my countdown here. And I'm going to roll it. Oh, and I got a 6. So that means I got a boon, which is amazing. If I had gotten something like a 1 or a 2, I would have found nothing. And if I had gotten a 3 or 4, I would have found a curio. Now, a curio is good. There's nothing wrong with a curio. But if I really wanted a boon, something that was definitely more beneficial, I could have decided, oh, I'm going to use my universalist here, my tinkerer, and I'm going to use their skill to modify the dice, to make it higher by 1 or 2 notches, something like that. And then I would have an object, or a better object, potentially. But it's kind of nice because they only have one skill that I haven't had to use it up, because it might be more useful in driving away quickly and escaping, or in picking a lock in the vault, something like that. But I happen to roll a 6, and so that's great. So we look at the table here, the level table. We are in the pawn shop, and the boon in the pawn shop is something called a loop, which is sort of like a magnifying glass that jewelers use, and it's useful in the radar activity. Now, I don't want to say too much more about it, but if you look in the back, if you get something, you can look up in the you could look up what a loop is in the glossary at the end of the book, and it would tell you what powers you get, and you can use it in the radar games. So radar is the game that chooses target locations. So something about it helps give you an advantage in that process. So here on the TMS sheet, in the level section, we're on grid 1. We didn't do anything with the bystander, so I'm not going to mark this. But we did search for an artifact, and we found a boon. So I'm going to say, yay, check mark, or circle this, or whatever. And I'm going to say that we found a loop. Like so. We also need to move this down to 3 because we used a turn searching. And while that happened, the guard moved again. Okay, so for my next turn, I can choose to go either to the right by 1 square or up by 1 square. And I will go up here. And then the guard will move 1 clockwise like so. Now we have 2 turns left that we can work at. And I'm going to use my next move to move 1 square to the right into the exit, and that takes us down to our final turn here. We don't need to worry about what the guard is doing or anything like that, because once we've hit this, as soon as we've hit it, as long as we didn't move into it and the guard was already there, we're free, we've reached the vault, we're safe and sound, and we move into the next game, which is the vault. Let me just go ahead to make sure I haven't missed anything here. So I'm going to page ahead to set the record straight. And what do we have here? Remember to mark your progress in the TMS's top section, which I did forget to do, so good thing there's a reminder. So in the top section here, in the progress, I want to mark that we've done the first floor of the only floor of the pawn shop. And again, this has a couple of extra dotted lines around the next couple of icons, because if we'd been in a location that was more difficult with a difficulty of 2 or 3, then it would take more time here. But we've only done the first one because it only had a difficulty of 1, and that's where we are. Next, if you used any crew skills, update the TMS refer section. We did not use our Tinkerer's RP, did not use their skill point here, so I won't cross this out. Ensure that the elapsed hours in the TMS's rotator section have been incremented by 1 per level grid equal to the target location's difficulty. Okay, so now we add +1. Yet again, we're doing really well here. So we spent 1 hour in one place, 1 hour in another place, and 1 hour in a third place. And that may be too many, actually, isn't it? I think I may have overmarked this. We spent 1 traveling and then 1 navigating the floor. Anyway, this is more like a check just to make sure that you've gotten everything done that you need to do. Ensure that the elapsed hours have been incremented by 1 per level grid. If we had gone through multiples, then yes, we would add extra numbers, or if we had done multiple attempts, or we'd run out of time, for example, if we had taken more than 6 turns per hour, then we would have had to increment yet another hour and roll for a new amount of turns for that hour. If we found any artifacts or persuaded any bystanders, update the TMS level section. We did not persuade any bystanders, but we did find an artifact, a boon called a loop, so I indicated that on this sheet here. Any artifact found may also be noted on the level table. I just don't personally like, writing in the book, scribbling that, circle the loop or anything, but if you want to, you could also indicate it there so that the next time you play, you'd see, oh, I have this item. Any artifact found may also be noted on the level table. Any bystander persuaded will require a deduction from RP and or loot in the TMS's stat section. This doesn't apply to us, but it basically means that if you were able to convince a bystander to help you, it's because you bribed them or convinced them somehow, either by using your reputation or some money. Were you compromised in level AM? We weren't. We never encountered the guard. We may still encounter the guard on our way out, but for the time being we did not get compromised and have to fight back or surrender or do any of those things. We successfully completed level AM. We weren't compromised. We need to keep all of the level grids, so remember to hold on to these because it will be necessary when you're escaping back out again. We'll use the same area used during the PM phase that you used during the AM phase. Next steps, where do you go from here? If you were compromised on any level grid, then you would go to an activity called Reviver, but we weren't. We were never compromised, so the infiltration went smoothly and the location's vault was found. Proceed to the lockpicking minigame at noon. And noon is the next section, but that's where we're going to stop it here today in this playthrough. We've gone through 5 sections of the AM phase, basically. And then the next one would be determined by playing the noon minigame. Okay, one last thing that I wanted to mention before we wrap up today. We've gotten a good start here, but I realized there's one thing that didn't come up in the mission, which was the use of the crew skills that might be useful to see briefly. So remember we had hired a tinkerer for free and that they had an RP of 1. So they had 1 skill use and we were saving it for some important event, say, lockpicking or racing out, making our escape in one of the later activities or mini games. But what if we had used their skill at something? What would that involve? So you'll notice I've been using these bookmarks, again, which you can get from lockdownludonaut.com and print them out. They also appear at the end of the book here, which you can cut out and use as well. They're 2-sided. There's a high ink side and a low ink side if you get the printable versions. And they basically contain very aggressively condensed, let's say, versions of some of the rules that are very common, just to sort of, refresh your memory or hold your place, obviously. So the Tinkerer was the type of crew member that occupied the center of the grid. Remember that Certain columns worked in certain places, like these 3 people worked in the level, these 3 worked in negotiations with the fence, the people on the bottom worked in driving, the people on top worked in the vault. The Tinkerer is a universalist. They can work anywhere, but they tend to be less effective, right? So the narrower the focus, the stronger the person tends to be, and the wider the focus, the more flexibility you have with them, but the weaker they tend to be at any of those things that they do. If we had needed to call upon our Tinkerer to do some kind of a number change, what we would have done is we would have crossed out the slash, which tells us, okay, they've been used up now in terms of their skills. Now they're exhausted. If they had had more slashes, then they would have more uses. They would have sort of more fortitude or more skills or whatever. So we could continue to cross off things every time we use it. But they had an RP of only 1 in our first game. So they are still very in training, let's say. They're a keen amateur. But what would happen if we called on them to use their skills? With the Tinkerer, they have a reminder here that they're a universalist. On a roll of 1 to 5, you roll. On a roll of 6, you pick. What does that mean? That means whenever you want to use the skill of a universalist, you have to roll a die. And we rolled a 2. If we rolled a 2, that's from 1 to 5, which means you have to roll for their skill. Okay, and what does that mean? That means that you would then look at the skill table, which we looked at but didn't ever need to use, and you would roll 2 dice and take the sum of those dice, if you're rolling, to determine the effect. So they would get, okay, they can roll their skill use. You'd roll 2 dice, and then the 5 and the 2 make a 7 when summed. That means their contribution that they can make in this instance is that they can subtract 1 hour from your elapsed hours. So they managed to do something so efficiently or quickly that it saves you time, and you could remove 1 from your hours, which is a great advantage in terms of making your allotted hours, because you are rewarded or penalized based on how timely you are when at the end of the game your elapsed hours are compared to your allotted hours. Now that's pretty good, but they may have rolled something completely different. They may have rolled a 10, in which case they couldn't undo time. They would need to replace a value with the result of a new die roll. So maybe, let's say you made a roll that you didn't like, you would roll another die and say, okay, you can take that original result, or you can take the result of the new die roll. So let's say your original was a 5, now you've rolled a 2, so you have a 2 instead because you weren't happy with the 5. So that's if you're rolling. However, if they had originally rolled a 6 when we were asking them to use their power, their ability, then they would have been able to pick, and they didn't have to roll randomly. You could look through the skills that they offer, and you could say, okay, I'm going to have them change the value up or down by a new die roll. So I would like to modify this 6 by 5, so the 6 can become a 1 now. We've modified the 6 by the value of the 5, if that was what we wanted to do. When you pick, you can choose any of these. You don't have to roll for it. So obviously it's advantageous to be able to pick, but the universalist rarely gets to pick. Whereas if you had hired a specialist, it's more like a 50-50 chance of rolling and picking. You can always do something, but what you can do is determined either by a roll or by a choice. And with a specialist, there's only a 1 in 6 chance that the specialist needs to roll. Most of the time, 5 and 6 times, they can pick, and that's why they're a specialist. But they're only good in one particular area, one very focused area, but they tend to be stronger in that area. Anyway, that's just something that occurred to me once we were done playing through the first phase, the AM phase of our first game. Never came up, but it might be useful for you to know in future in your own games. I hope that helps. Well, that's all for now, but if you're interested in getting your own copy, it's currently available in softcover paperback. You can also find more details, printable sheets, bookmarks, and more at lockdownludonaut.com. as well as all the videos on my YouTube channel, reveals, deeper dives, tutorials, and more for this and all my other work. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. But until then, thanks for watching, and I bid you happy heisting. Talk to you soon.